Hey everyone, it's Tammy. It's been a while. Hope everyone made it through the holidays as with as little stress as possible. And so, Happy New Year! Here we are in 2016. I have had a lot of changes go on in my life, and just really excited right now because it's sunny. Part of my change is I relocated to the East Coast, and of course, found myself in the middle of this blizzard of Jonas, but I'm in Delaware, on the coast of Delaware, and so instead of snow, we got an extraordinary amount of water, and we're still waiting for it to recede. Nonetheless, I thought I would take a little bit of time because it's been on my mind to kind of go over a couple of things in order to help make sense of what this is that I'm talking about all the time. Kind of decompress health and wellness, if you will, not to oversimplify the issues with regards to actually working with the individual body, but just to kind of simplify what the decline in health and wellness really is attributed to. And also, my desire is to dispel the labels, kind of like do away with the labels. I know, and I've mentioned this before, that labels do help. I mean, labels, also known as diagnoses, do help in the sense when you're trying to get certain services, including insurance. But beyond that, they have absolutely no use on the street. And I say that especially with a great passion for any mental health concerns that people are dealing with, as well as addiction. I consider addiction, besides being the behaviors that we are familiar with, also a mental concern. Not that there's a mental imbalance, not at all. I don't feel like there's anything such as a mental imbalance so much as there is a chemical imbalance that can trigger mental emotional instability as well as physical concerns, whether it be addiction, having a dependence or tolerance to certain things. I see the same thing in the area of autism and schizophrenia. So with that said, I want to kind of back up a little bit and just say that the decline in health is equally attributable to the nutrient use, the way our body actually uses nutrition. And this is far beyond digestion. This goes into the way the cells actually assimilate nutrients and use the nutrients. So it's not just the breakdown of nutrition, it's also the way the nutrients are being used. So to kind of assist in that area, I thought I would, like I said, share a little bit. And so what it bottom lines to is that every cell function requires certain cofactors. So they get the instructions on what they're supposed to do, and they use the cofactors, which could be a mineral, could be an amino acid, could be a vitamin. So this is what I'm talking about. So the body takes in proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and then begins to break it down in the digestive system, as we're all familiar with, and then it begins to absorb it into the bloodstream. Okay, this is what we're familiar with. After that, the body picks up. It takes in various nutrients depending on the cell function, depending on what it's supposed to be doing. So for that reason, all hormones and neurotransmitters, they require, like I say, various cofactors in order to produce the right chemical. When that doesn't occur in the event of a genetic adaptation, also known as a polymorphism, also known as a variation, and more finely referred to in the general public as a defect, when any one of those words is present, then you have a misuse of nutrients, because what happens then is the cell is not getting the proper instructions. Therefore, it picks up the wrong nutrient. Do we know which ones are functioning optimally and which ones aren't? No. These occur for any number of reasons. Could be positive, could be negative. It could be, stress. It could be medications. It could be lifestyle, diet, any number of factors goes on that would cause the body to actually deactivate certain genes. Our genes function very much like light switches. The epigenome produces affects the methylation process, and it regulates itself. So it can switch the genes off and on rather quickly, and more importantly, for good reason. So you may say, well, it's not a good reason to have a genetic defect, and I disagree, because at some point your body was exposed to something and the gene switched itself off in order to protect it. That's what I refer to as the preservation of the species. Other times it I don't want to say it ever does it for the wrong reason. I feel like it's for a good reason, although the long-term effects of that gene being turned off and the wrong use of nutrients does create health issues. So what happens when the wrong nutrients or no nutrient gets used? So like I said, it's very difficult to identify which genetic adaptations are actually leading to problems, which ones are just temporarily turned off, because this epigenome will switch. It can turn it off, on. We know this. We've demonstrated this time and time again through research. So this, in my world, gives us an upper hand on the long-term health issues that we may or may not be facing, because at that point we get to begin to make choices through awareness, and recognizing that if we eat something and we don't feel right, that is indicating that something is occurring, that we don't go back and do it again. It's just like, when the burner's hot and you touch it, you never touch it again when it's hot. So other times is you can walk outside and all of a sudden you get a nose full of something you don't even know, you didn't see anything, and you just start sneezing. There you have an indication that the body is responding appropriately. It's not a bad thing to sneeze. It's not a bad thing to get a runny nose or itchy eyes. It is just the body responding to a particular stimulus, and it is letting you know that something in the area is not supporting you or good for you. Other factors that help the genes off and on is our thoughts. And people kind of frown at me when I say that, and I will turn that around and say, okay, so how about stress? Let's just look at it that way. The way we think about certain things contributes to internal stress, and thereby causing the genes to, again, turn themselves off and on, depending on how you allow yourself to be calm and positive about something versus worked up or not even aware that you're worked up. It could be just the pressure from work. It could be, parenting. Anything can create these adaptations in the epigenome, at which time then that particular dialogue between cells or gene and cells doesn't work efficiently, and thereby, like I say, sometimes it doesn't even use a nutrient, other times it uses the wrong nutrient, in turn producing the wrong chemical. And this is where I wanted to go with all of this. So you've produced, and the ones that are actually causing problems, producing the wrong chemistry. Wrong in the sense that it's not what the body needs. So now that you have this going on long term, you can have any number of health conditions occur. For instance, if the body starts to produce too much ammonia, that's indicative of not, using histamine, glycine, serine, and so forth in order to protect the nerves, develop, to partner sugars and fats and sugars and proteins appropriately to help develop a good tissue. This is a lot of what goes on, and a lot of us are actually experiencing issues along these lines. So ammonia, like I say, is a toxin that builds up when there is a misuse of nutrients. Peroxynitrite is another one. When ammonia builds up, you are less effective at producing glutathione, which is a very important antioxidant in the body. When peroxynitrite builds up, you're not producing SOD catalase, is how I will say it. I paused for a moment because I could use the whole word, but I'm just going to refer to it as SOD catalase. And that actually requires various nutrients to help produce that. That is another form of antioxidant that the body uses to reduce inflammation, stimulate the production of neurotransmitters, testosterone, nitric oxide. Thereby, if you don't have that going on, or you have less of it happening, you can either end up with neurotoxins, which can scar the central, the nerves, lesions in the brain, ulcerative colitis, indigestion, respiratory issues. So, because it just is very harsh on tissue, peroxynitrite is. So there are ways to, through diet, to regulate and override these misuse of nutrients, and help to offset any potential damage or future damage. So you can absolutely do it with nutrients. You would be taking what I would consider therapeutic doses of nutrition, or you can partner that with essential oils and begin to provide the proper instructions, and thereby in stimulating the effective use of nutrients. Because now, like I say, and I've said this before, the human DNA, the human body, and this is actually what one of the things that occurred to me a while ago while I was on my journey to share. And I've shared this on Instagram, I've shared this on my Facebook, and if you'd like me to send it to you personally, I will. But the body takes in chemicals, okay, and everything that we consume is a chemical. I've said this before as well. And the particular example I'm going to use is this, and that's caffeine. So we consume something that is a natural source of caffeine. The body takes it in, the liver has to metabolize, and the liver metabolizes the chemicals in order to detox. So what it does is it metabolizes the caffeine, breaks it down, and turns it into secondary metabolites, depending on the chain of command, if you will. It'll break it down into theobromine, theophylline, and xanthine. Interestingly enough, xanthine and theophylline are actually now replicated by pharmaceutical companies for the purpose of asthma and respiratory issues. So I use that example not because I'm supporting the consumption of caffeine, although I do like my cup of coffee every morning. It is to demonstrate how the body actually functions. It takes the chemicals in, it breaks it down, and it either eliminates it via healthy channels, or it would or it doesn't, and then thereby, if it's not breaking it down properly, or it'll use it as it's necessary. This is why caffeine opens us up. Some people have a tendency to cough more and kind of clear, the early morning clearing. This is the result of the caffeine being metabolized. Now, the important part here is the caffeine, these other chemicals that I've mentioned, the theophylline, the xanthine, and the theobromine, these are called secondary metabolites. This is what the body takes caffeine and turns it into. The same thing can be said for opium. I mean, this is how the body does it. This is the beautiful complexity of the body, because it is designed to work with nature, because caffeine is naturally occurring in many things, and so it works with nature. Opium is the opium poppy. I'm not suggesting, again, that we all go out and get our own dose of opium, heroin, morphine. I'm not doing that. But what I'm proposing here, actually not even proposing, what I'm trying to point out here is that the opium poppy was consumed thousands of years ago, a long, long time ago. And yes, there are psychoactive effects to it. Back in the 1600s, they began to break down plants and determined that plants actually convert certain things. They do the chemistry, the chemicals from the sunlight. It produces chemicals. There's carbon dioxide that they require. There's the nutrients from the soil. And so through all of the way the plant body actually takes nutrients in, it also creates secondary metabolites. This is what essential oils are. So in theory, what you do is when you're using essential oils, you're actually relying on the secondary metabolites of plants to source the body where the body is not functioning properly. To me, it's a blessing that we have this. But what happened in the 1600s when they were beginning to extract plants and break plants apart and identify constituents, they identified the alkaloids that create the high in opium and turned it into, I'm not sure, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember which one came first, heroin or morphine, but it is all coming from the same alkaloid ingredient. Now, when the body gets heroin, it turns it into morphine, which then turns it in, believe it or not, into codeine. And this is, again, where research comes in, and they recognize, they saw what happened in this trail of, opium, which is where we get the opiates from. It turns into the alkaloids. Then they recognize that it's getting broken down into morphine and codeine. And we know that those are two medications that we use quite frequently for pain relief. So again, a representation of secondary metabolites and how the body actually uses it. This is the benefit of even an opium plant. And again, I'm not proposing that we all start growing opium poppies. It's just a demonstration of what the body does with a plant, and it breaks it down for further use. This is the reason why I really love essential oils. Now, if you're consuming plants through, by eating them, I don't encourage the use of essential oils through ingestion. I know there's other companies out there that do, but we don't want to break them down any further. In their pure form, when they are authentic and genuine essential oils, they contain the information that our body can use and further turn into whatever other chemicals it needs. If it can't, it'll eliminate it. Again, through the lymph, through the kidneys, through respiration, even through the skin. So it's a really important thing to remember that when you tie all of this together, how nature actually works beautifully with the body. And so I offer all of that because, like I said in the very beginning, the decline in health comes from a misuse of nutrients. We can either take therapeutic amounts of food and supplements to try and offset these genetic adaptations, or we can pair them with very specific essential oils that are selected for your body type. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is a bio-individual, client-specific, personalized wellness. And by pairing your body and pairing your nutrients for your body with an essential oil, you are getting the ultimate benefit. It does support when you're taking medications, because it even enhances that even further. Keep in mind, medications are targeted for specific genetic receptors. They are specifically targeted. Research goes in, they study the plants, they study the genome, they pay attention to what ingredients within the plant is doing what, and then they turn that around and they make a medication out of it. So they're watching the receptors that they're affecting. They're paying attention to the genes, and the gene responses, and they turn it into a medication. I don't disagree with this, because on a large scale, it's very difficult to regulate your growing season and to be able to attend to the mass health issues. There has to be an alternative way besides nature. And so thereby the pharmaceuticals actually do benefit. However, they would be doing us even more benefit if we would pair them nutritionally and essential oils. and having it work together, because it's not about one being better than the other. It's about working with what we have and creating a solid foundation for wellness. So, like I said, misuse of nutrients. Then what happens there is you have genes that are not responding in a way that they are originally designed to do. They're responding in a different way. Is this a bad thing or a good thing? I'm not going to judge it. What I will tell you is that there are changes that we're seeing within human beings. One of them is autism. What I do know is that I think I've mentioned this before, the FOXP2 gene, which is known primarily for speech and language, is a transcription factor that actually regulates neurochemistry. In the human species, and any animal that makes a vocalization has this gene. And the human species this gene complex is being naturally targeted. And what we're finding is an increase in autism. There are other gene complexes that are also being identified and tied to autism and schizophrenia, depending on where the adaptations lie. And again, these particular genes that they're identifying are responsible, again, for neurochemistry regulation. What I will say to that is we can look at it as a label and a disease or a disability, or we can say, in the case of schizophrenia, we often refer to that more as a disease than a disability. But there are too many common genes. I have a psychotherapist friend and colleague that has informed me, he's in another country, that a lot of children are being diagnosed with autism because in our mindset, schizophrenia hasn't been noticed until, young adulthood and, late teens, early 20s at the very earliest. And what we're finding is that there is such a thing as early onset schizophrenia. And again, the genetic similarities are there. They're coming out on almost on a daily basis of new and new recognition, more and more recognition of the same genes being tied to either autism and or schizophrenia. How I see it is there's just a full spectrum of any number of symptoms that can take us from mild autism all the way up to some severe schizophrenia issues. And again, this isn't to oversimplify those lives that are being affected by these conditions. This is basically to help us wrap our heads around another way of thinking about it, which is that when the body is not breaking down nutrition properly, or there is a factor that's occurred within the mother, and this doesn't mean that us as mothers are doing anything wrong and harming our children. It is just what it is. It is the world that we live in. We have a highly stressful world. Just the last 3 days alone, we're crazy because instead of getting 3 feet of snow, any significant snowfall, what we had here was minimal snow when the ocean came in. And so we had 2.5 to 3 feet of water. You don't think that didn't cause stress and lack of sleep? Of course it did. But on an ongoing basis, in a family setting or whatever other, the mother is exposed to, and it's just it's the perfect mix. It can create a neurochemical imbalance. Now you have the brain that is firing in a different way. That's how, yeah. So when you have the genetics in the perfect storm, and they are regulating the chemistry the way they are wired to do, you're going to see changes in the brain structure. When you look at brain imaging, they will show a difference. They try to show a difference between an autistic brain and a normal brain, a schizophrenic brain and a normal brain, and a brain affected by ADHD and a normal brain. So we see these vacillations between what's supposed to be normal and what these other health conditions their brains look like. My proposal here is the reason why we even see changes in activation patterns and or structures in the brain isn't because this is a problem. It is just a representation of a different chemistry. And so now you have a different structure. Before I go any further, I just want to say that we have identified a difference between the male brain, a female brain, and a transgender brain. We've also identified differences in structures between a homosexual brain and a heterosexual brain in males. They haven't done a lot of research in the way of lesbian brains, but there has been some research done. So we're seeing a difference in these structures. And like I even said, with transgender brains, the structure is different. And we are, as a culture, coming around to accepting these structural differences in the brain and the way they are manifesting in our society. I want to ask everyone to begin thinking along these lines when it comes to autism, schizophrenia, any mental health issue for that matter, including addiction, because it's not a bad thing that the brains have developed the way they have. It's just we see these images, they show us that the brains are working differently, and what we know from that point forward is that when the chemistry is different, the reactions are going to be different, whether it be systemically. It could be a heightened sense of, temperature sensitivity. There's heightened sensitivity throughout the body, and the way it's being manifested, as we see, is a lot of externally, is we see a lot of the agitation. We see a lot of the stimming, the scripting, the inability to focus. However, we can go down the line of symptoms, but this doesn't mean that it's functioning poorly. It means that it's functioning differently, and it's again because of the nutrient use. Is it a poor use of nutrients? Well, according to our normal brains, of course. But I don't want to go along the lines of poor, bad, or wrong. I would prefer to use the word different. It's a different use of nutrients in this case when we're talking about brain structure. And when I come in and work with people who are living with any one of these conditions, it's more about helping to not change them, especially with autism and schizophrenia. It's to actually help the brain. Because keep in mind, the body picks up. It's not like the human body and the plants are, communicating like, oh, this is what the human body is supposed to be like, and the plants are supposed to fix it. No, it's our DNAs repair themselves in a similar fashion. We break down chemistry in a similar fashion. And what we find is that they work synergistically. So even in the face of autism, it's not about trying to fix that child or that adult with autism. It's about helping the brain self-soothe the body. It's about helping to stabilize the chemical production so that the heightened sensitivity doesn't consume the individual. We see a lot with self-harm and anger. It's really about helping to regulate the chemistry so that the body actually responds in a more loving, peaceful, healthier way, so that they are then better equipped to communicate with the world around them, and the world can actually reciprocate. So this isn't about fixing something that's bad or wrong, or poorly designed. This is about helping to work with what is and allowing the body to either break down the excessive chemistry and eliminate it effectively, as well as helping the rest of the body kind of normalize itself. These people that we love have an awful lot to share. They're here to express themselves just like everyone else. And so if we actually begin to assist them in this fashion and stop trying to fix them, we might experience a different world altogether. I know those people who are on medications, especially in the area of schizophrenia, it would take a little bit more work. If you have autism, or you're dealing with as an older person with autism, again, there may be medications involved. The younger we get, there's fewer kids on meds, but I can't really say that because I've met too many kids actually, between the ages of 4 and 6 who've been taking medications, some pretty significant medications for at least 2 years. So it's, but there again, they do work side by side. When it comes to addiction, I had people ask me why autism and why addiction. They're like two different things. And I said, no, they're not. It's the neurochemistry. Yes, there are other factors that become involved once the person's been living with an addictive behavior for a long time, because there are psychological, there's definitely physiological, there's also socioeconomic, there's a whole person, there's a whole world that's involved with addictive behaviors, but it's not impossible to help them find that smooth road of recovery. And I believe wholeheartedly that a lot of people become involved with these drugs and substances because they're really seeking to self-soothe, because they actually have some level of heightened sensitivity, a fear of expression, whatever the case may be. Their temperament, their personality, their psychological makeup, again, is different than what we claim is normal. But if you look at the neurochemistry, it is affecting that as well. And so, there's all of this talk of disease model and genetics, and I take it one step further. It's not what's inherited. It is more about the chemistry. It's the genetic adaptations that occurred prior to birth and that continue to occur throughout life that eventually take someone down the road of addictive behaviors. So this is the reason why, and again, it doesn't take the place of therapy. It doesn't take the place of any sort of pharmacotherapy that the person is using. It just allows the person to enhance their recovery process. So this is really what I wanted to share with you today, was really about the nutrient use. When it comes to physical issues beyond mental health, it is, like I was talking about earlier with the peroxynitrite and pneumonia, we do want to right those imperfections, because those imperfections do lead someone down the road to autoimmune disorders, cardiovascular, respiratory issues, even more digestive issues, as I've mentioned, and again, even the neurochemistry. So those are ones that I would look to create more of righting the wrong, if you will, through the use of essential oils and nutrients. But with regards to the mental health issues that are more psychological, neurochemical imbalances, I would also look at those other factors, like I mentioned, these other chemicals. I would also take those into consideration based on the family history. That's incredibly important, because that'll give you insight into what other genetic adaptations are occurring. When I see all these publications where they start talking about and identifying a particular gene, it's not that only gene, because you have the rest of the system. Each one of us is walking around with almost probably close to 10 million different genetic adaptations. Which ones are functioning properly, which ones aren't, again, your guess is as good as mine. But once you begin to look at the family history, whatever is being presented right now, along with whatever additional diagnoses the person has, you work with that as a whole. So with that said, I bid you adieu for the day. I hope you're enjoying the rest of your afternoon, or wherever you are in the world, your day. And I look forward to speaking with you very soon. Again, if you have any questions or comments, by all means, let me know. You're welcome to email me privately, and as well as provide suggestions or requests for particular topics. I kind of work on what comes up with me and a particular client. Speaking of which, I will add one more thing here, and that is soy. When we talk about autism, specifically, gluten-free diets, casein-free diets, the GFCF diet, I want to go one step further and strongly encourage people to avoid soy. and even if you have, especially even if you have ADHD, the reason why is not necessarily because it's a GMO. It's more along the lines that soy contains phytoestrogens that act very much like estrogen in the body. And what I've mentioned before is that when estrogen levels are high, we tend to have the yeast levels go up. Yeast will infiltrate tissue. It doesn't necessarily have to be in just the cavities that we're familiar with. It will get into the tissues. And when yeast and estrogen go up, histamine goes up because histamine is part of the immune system. So if you're living with someone, or you yourself are living with autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, you want to avoid anything that contains soy, because you don't want to increase those particular you don't want to create imbalances, period. And keep in mind that when you throw one chemical out of balance, they all go out of balance. And helping the body to restore balance is where I come in. And I will say this because I got into a conversation with someone else at one point a while back. Magnesium glycinate would be the supplement that I would recommend in the area of histamine, estrogen issues. Not any other kind of magnesium, but the magnesium glycinate 400, because the magnesium actually helps to regulate the hormonal system, the endocrine system. The glycinate is a form of glycine that is needed by the body to help produce SAMe. The body does produce its own SAMe, and you're not going to do yourself any good by going out and taking SAMe. You're better off taking it, the magnesium glycinate, to stimulate the SAMe. You'll actually support insomnia, and you will help the body to deactivate histamine on another gene. Not the two genes that I've mentioned before, but there's another gene complex that is responsible for deactivating histamine as well, and SAMe is involved with that. So there you go. So I would strongly encourage that, and avoiding soy. And if you have any questions, let me know. I also have not said this before because I really don't. I want to be able to continue to do this. And so whatever donations, if you're willing to make a donation or would like to make a donation, there is a donation button on the page about me. And they're always welcome. I appreciate those as always. And because I do want everyone to be well. That is the bottom line of why I do this. And if I can assist you personally, please let me know. I am available for consultations. And as I've done those around the world, it's not just here in the United States. So I look forward to hearing from you. And again, have an absolutely beautiful day. And I will see you very soon. Bye-bye now.